Hello, everyone, and welcome to Curb Your Enthusiasm. I am John Lorenzini, aka JLo, the VP of Marketing Science here at LiftLab. Thank you for joining us here today on CYE, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Right now, we have 9 attendees. Just want to let everyone know, feel free to drop questions in. This is a live conversation. We are glad that you're tuning in live, and we'll cut it up after and be able to distribute it all over the platforms. But a little bit about CYE. It's where conversations from experts on the front lines of growth marketing, analytics, and measurement have lively conversations. It's about having debate, keeping it all jargon-free, not being too academic, not being too practitioner, but rather the blending of the two. And today we have a very special episode where I am hosting hosts. So wish me luck. Both of them are from the Analytics Power Hour. We have Moe Kiss and Tim Wilson. Our pre-call before this yesterday was a lot of fun. We had strong soapboxes, lots of debate, and very strong opinions. So I'm very, very excited about this. And today's episode is called You Have Chosen Wisely, AI-nalyzing Marketing Measurement Tools. Mo, Tim, and I are going to be talking about how to choose the right marketing measurement tools, the impact of AI on measurement, strategies ensuring data consistency and accuracy, as well as real-world examples of how to convert that practitioner to academia or that academia to practitioner. Now let's meet our speakers. First up, we have Moe Kiss. She is the Director of Data Science for Marketing at Canva and the co-host of Analytics Power Hour. Welcome to the show all the way from tomorrow morning in Australia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. And then next up, we got Tim Wilson. He co-founded Facts and Feelings, where he was also the head of data solutions, as well as co-founder and co-host of the Analytics Power Hour with Mo. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Hi. And Mo, it's weird that you're drinking a glass of wine, seeing it's first thing in the morning, but
Of course, we're going to kick it off this way.
Been recording with you for a while, so I guess well it goes.
You know, whatever loosens you up before the show. Yeah. But also for everybody in the audience, please pepper in questions. If we can work them in live to the conversation, I'll add them. Otherwise, we have a Q&A section at the end. So let's jump right in. I think one of the first conversations that we had yesterday that I want to chat through with you, Mo, is the evolution in stakeholder management. You know, a lot of analytics software, tools, implementations, methodologies are out there, but how does change happen in an organization like Canva or your previous experience there?
Yeah, I think the reality or my biggest learning kind of going through the journey that we've been on in marketing measurement at Canva is how much you need to bring your stakeholders along for the journey. I think we thought that the real hurdle was going to be all of the technical challenges. And for those listening, we actually went from basically having to build our own, even like sessionization tables to then building out our first attribution model. We went from like last touch to multi-touch, and then we started to dabble in experimentation before moving on to what now we basically now have a suite of measurement tools. So we have an MMM, we have experimentation, and various different kinds of experimentation, as well as a few different algorithms that we use to help us decide on marketing spend and performance. And yeah, I guess I thought the technology was going to be the most difficult component, but the reality was it's been several years of really having to work with our stakeholders and get them to kind of understand why we've made this move and I guess what the value add is. And the thing that has been most interesting for me is that we have recently hired, a group of new leaders in the marketing space who were in different geographic regions. And you kind of take for granted that the marketers who've been around for a while have been on this journey with you, so they understand it. And so then you get these new people in the business and you're like, oh, I need to start at ground zero. Like, I really need to go back to the drawing board and explain, like, you know, why we use this particular metric or why this methodology for this. And the reality is like, what we've built is more complex. And so we have to spend a lot more time working with our stakeholders to get them to understand the value out of that complexity versus the simplicity of what we were doing before.
Plus, you're doing all of that in the midst of kind of explosive growth and geographic expansion, right? Like, so I don't know. It's been fun to being on a podcast with Mo and then separately chatting and the challenges that you have had over the years of where things are. I don't envy that ride.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I've particularly noticed over the last period of time people sort of come into the business with these preconceived notions. And I think the one thing that, I mean, I have strong feelings about attribution as a measurement philosophy, as most people do. I think it gave people false certainty. And so people kind of come in overly confident and they're like, oh, this is how my last company did it. And this was perfect because there was never any uncertainty. And I'm just, you really have to take a step back. Oh, I'm going to set Tim off in a minute. You really have to take a step back and I mean, I hate saying the word like education or re-education, but you really have to work with those stakeholders to get them to understand, why that isn't best in class anymore and what the alternatives are. And it's a really hard thing to shift because it was so simple and they think simple means right, if that makes sense.
Or simple, I mean, if blissfully ignorant, I don't know. I went along the path of multi-touch attribution. I mean, this is Mo and I will agree with this, but I think we've spent 20 years ago, digital sort of headed us down a path that was actually not helpful. And now we're having to deal with a lot of correcting for that. Cause it was like, we went from, oh my gosh, compared to a billboard or a print ad, look at the data we have. And now we know so much more. And that was true. But then but we don't have this other data. Or if we just got all of the data, then we can just do math and we'll know the truth. And then along the way, like the digital marketing especially just kind of grew up in the absence of econometrics or statistics, or I think there was a philosophy of like, we can measure everything. We don't need statistics because we have the whole population. And it just headed down this path of, surely if we can track all of this stuff, then it'll give us the answer, and just completely missed the boat on even the concept of incrementality. Like, and I was guilty of that for a number of years. Like then when like the light bulb went on, like, oh, it doesn't mean we don't want to do that, but it's not telling us at all what we want. And then I think you've got the media side and the media vendors kind of are incentivized to say, look, this is all so fancy and perfect. Look, it's a data-driven algorithm. Just, throw your money at us and we will optimize where your spend goes. So then as correctives are trying to come in, they're having to say, wait a minute, what Google and Facebook and what they've said. And I think they're careful now to say things that are accurate, but will be grossly misinterpreted. So that re-educating, it's not like re-educating, oh, that thing you learned last week maybe isn't correct. It's that stuff that has been deeply ingrained in you for your entire career.
Evolution and the change of kind of the back to basics, the bringing in stats, bringing in economics is definitely a relevant conversation as the identity signals are becoming more difficult. But I think one thing, Mo, that you mentioned in our pre-call that was super interesting was how you have different measurement approaches for different markets, depending on if it's a new market for you, an existing market, and would love for you to kind of expand on that one.
Yeah, so I suppose we're definitely aiming to get to the place where every market has like best in class, or every market that confusingly we call a marketing market, because we don't market in every single market that we're in, because we're in over 100 markets and that would be very intense. But we definitely do want to get to the stage, like the goal for the team is that all of our markets that we're investing in have the same level of measurement. But the reality is like that's not feasible unless you have endless resources and people. And so the phase that we've really been in is like trying to prioritize our highest spent markets first, or where we see the biggest growth opportunity. And we've made the decision that we're rolling out MMMs in those markets first. And like, we do need to have a different MMM in each market. And if anyone has advice on how we don't, then I'm open to it. But like our markets are quite different. So it's really hard for us to like build a comparison between one country and another country. And And then we also have different options. We have multiple different versions of experimentation that we do dependent on the market as well. And so the other thing that's quite difficult as we work with stakeholders at the moment is different markets have different levels of measurement maturity. So some markets are what we would call like gold standard now, which are our highest investment markets. Other ones, we are still using last touch attribution because that's what's available. And then we have to draw insights from comparable markets where we can. And so that's the thing where like we're still in that evolution. And so trying to work with stakeholders to understand that like we can't do it all at once. Like it's just not possible. Or if like we're going into a new market, we're trying to be a bit smarter now of, okay, how do we set up experiments as we turn on new markets so that we can use those learnings to guide things moving forward versus, previously we might have just been trying to move really fast and we would have turned it on, or the data team weren't involved enough in the conversation to be like, how do we set this up so we can almost run it like a natural experiment as we launch? But it is really challenging, right? Because you have some marketer in Europe who's like, wait, I want what is in the US. And you're like, we're getting there. We're working as quickly as we can to get there. But then it comes down to like really needing to triangulate results for the business and help them. Like I said, we have a suite of measurement tools. It's not like one tool has all the answers. So really helping work closely with them so that they know which tool to use for which decision that they're making.
Absolutely. And I think, Tim, you mentioned the conversation around getting getting the right data versus getting the data right. That was a topic that you hit on. So as Mo mentioned, with different markets have different levels of signal fidelity, test options, how they split things. How do you see that that's important in your day-to-day in terms of managing expectations?
So, I mean, it's interesting as Mo talks about it as kind of a suite of tools, and it's really easy to have organizations or stakeholders like focus on the tool, and then Mo kind of added on the part of what really the starting point should be. What decision are we trying to make? Which, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And then I was, and I'm going to now blank on who I was reading. And I think it was an old Cassie Kavrakov post that was talking about secondhand data versus primary data, but making the point that there is a tendency, and I'll again say in digital, I mean, if you take like digital analytics, where it was like the data was just kind of getting thrown off through the existence of the website when they were server logs, and then it was, let's analyze that. Well, that's inherently kind of crappy. You're trying to take just the data that's being like thrown off. And I think when you get into marketing, if you've got pixels, there's a degree of, if you say, well, what is this? What is the technology? Now let me come at that tool or that data with whatever my question is. And it's pretty easy to get sucked into, this is the data that, or the tool that I'm looking at. Now let me contort my question to try to fit the tool. Whereas coming at it from the other direction, I don't think it was that long ago. And Mo, you may remember where I was coming from. Experimentation meant website A/B testing. You had to have individual user fidelity, and it was super expensive to do any sort of matched market tests. And I still run into a lot of companies that the fundamental question they're trying to figure out is, does this channel work for me at all? And it wouldn't even be on the table, I would say, like 5 years ago, to say you should design a controlled experiment and figure out if that, if it's TikTok or, a channel that was new at the time, or connected TV, let's figure out what question you're trying to answer, as opposed to saying, oh, well, Nielsen or somebody else says they have all this data. So they have all this data on this new channel. So now I'm going to use that data. And now do you have a tool that you can spin that through to answer the question? It's like, time out. What's the actual question we're trying to answer? Or on the flip side, we have 3 completely different ideas for calls to action. And I just want to know which one resonates. Sure, last touch, throw them out and, throw them out there and see which ones get click-throughs, and maybe what they get, conversions. So when it gets to like, do you have the right data, it goes to what's the magnitude of the decision, the stakes of the decision that you're making. How long does the answer to that, is that decision going to last? And to me, that's what's tends to be missing, because it is so easy to get sucked into some technology
of impression that I think makes things particularly difficult. But I saw Mo, you unmuted. Did you have something you'd like to add to that?
Oh no, I never actually even thought about that. That's yeah, I never even thought about the different definition of impressions, which I feel is going to send me like a whole nother tailspin now.
Well, I actually got that from one of your old podcasts, the one with Kathleen, where she was focusing on language. And I think that is a really important piece, is like, we're using these words as if they're the same or similar, but they couldn't be more different, right? And having that universal currency, especially when we're doing like a market mix model, you have impressions and clicks coming in the model, but if you're doing it across everything, it's not the same thing. And I think with hierarchical models, and I don't want to go too nerd for this one, it does provide some information in terms of if it's grouped together, it's probably of a similar unit in the way it's classified in the model. But I do think that illusion of it is where the intuition kicks in. And that's why models and data is not going to fully replace a marketer, because there's just so much nuance that's not captured with that common currency, because it's not common.
I have to, my horror story on this is probably going back 10 or 11 years. I was at a digital agency. I was doing a lot of the digital analytics stuff, and we were working with a bunch of CPG or FMCG brands, and they had agencies that were doing their mix modeling. And so what would trickle down to us was, oh, we need the total page views by week or something for our mix model. And it would, because they would treat the website as a channel, and then the website would be a channel. And then no matter how much I would try to shout up the chain, they're like, but wait a minute, you're also counting paid search, which is sending traffic to the website. Like you're double counting, but you're counting this as an impression. And you kind of work your way midway up, and somebody said, look, I need a measure, and I'm going to use this. And it's like, okay, but we've again decided not to actually think about what we're doing. We've gotten too caught up in, the model or the tool. And that happened multiple times, where I also had a separate, when I had a different CPG client that had the grid where they were going to put equivalent measures for every channel, was going to have its reach measure, its engagements measure. It sounds fine. It just doesn't really work, because the nature of the channels and what they're doing and how they're doing it. But they were like, we want to make it simple. We want to have an apples to apples comparison, so that we can compare a billboard to a radio ad to a Facebook post. And it's like, but what are we really trying to do? You're trying to come up with some formula that's going to spit out the answer, instead of sitting back and thinking like, I'm a marketer. What am I trying to do? Who am I trying to have do that? What are my ideas for how I might do that? How can I go validate whether those ideas hold up or don't hold up, and have that real clarity on that before you say, I'm going to come up with this grand framework that's going to give me complete apples to apples comparisons.
Yeah. I've just had an epiphany. I feel like I've just had an epiphany. As you were describing that exact situation, I was like, they're trying to simplify, and I shouldn't say they, because like I am part of the marketing organization, but we're trying to simplify in order to make comparisons. Because the problem that we're trying to solve is that we're trying to understand incrementality, but our brain doesn't naturally, when we're trying to understand incrementality, think about off and on. We think about comparisons. And I don't know, I feel like that framing in my mind, I'm going to have to like mull over this over the next few days and see if there's anything there. But I feel like there's a string that I need to pull about like how we make that breakthrough with our stakeholders. So thanks, Tim.
Oh, awesome.
Cool. You'll come back in a couple of days. We'll be off of this. Be like, yeah, that didn't make any sense. You're an idiot. But
Well, I'll
luckily,
be sure to tune into the next.
Don't come up with that in the next 30 minminutes. So
yeah, I'll tune into the next analytic power hour, and Mo's just going to start dropping knowledge, and we'll look forward to that. I think that this currency question that we're talking through, this kind of relates to the topic of AI, Tim. You're kind of the, as Mo would say, the technologist of the room here. So with the cutting edge AI technology out there, how do you feel? Is it smoke and mirrors? Do you feel there are challenges with it? Where are the pockets that you feel are showing real promise in the direction of, either measurement or marketing in general?
So yeah, I will not accept the label of being a technologist, but
well,
sure.
compare it to me.
I don't know. I think, I mean, there's definitely a gold rush. Did you guys, the Scott Brinker's MarTech Landscape just came out again, and it's like every year it grows, and you point to it, and it's had like 4,000 companies added. Like it's down to where it's just dots. Like you can't even put logos on it. And he says like this is the AI. These are people jumping on the AI train and saying AI can do all these things. I don't have a lot of faith in AI being very good at saying, did this work or did this not work, or tell me which channel, because it's missing the human component of what is my creative marketing thought? What am I trying to do that should have some level of uniqueness and value that will, in the grand scheme of things, help my company sustain some competitive advantage? And if I'm relying on something that is just comparing me to the average or looking for anomalies, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think the side of AI that is spin stuff up quickly, a code assistant or, simple queries, natural language type stuff, sure. And there's some challenges with that. I've had the most fun with it, and where I've seen people where I say that feels really valuable is using it as a brainstorm companion. But just, having a little bit of a discussion with it, like you're having a discussion with a bright, experienced, coworker, where it's a give and take. So I get really nervous when it's, the AI. I don't think the AI is going to do a better mixed model. Like I can't do, I've never done a mixed model outside of like a theoretical, junk data set. Everybody I know does mixed models is like, there are a million judgment calls that need to get made that come with human experience. And if somehow we think that AI is going to be making those judgment calls correctly, when AI will spit out hallucinations and even saying, yeah, but it's going to figure it out. Like, I don't think so. I kind of think the human beings who are really sort of thinking things through. So I think efficiency booster, sure. Ideation tool, sure. Giving the answer and absolving marketers from needing to do independent and creative thought and figure out what really gnarly questions they're trying to answer. I'm kind of bearish on that in the near term.
Can I draw a parallel which is not remotely related to data? I was in France drinking champagne because, as we all know, I am a champagne lover.
It was a day that ended in Y. Okay.
Yeah. I know. We had a beautiful French host, and I said to him, I was like, what do you think of like Dom Perignon and like, Moet, like all these fancy brands that people buy a French champagne in other countries? And he goes, the French buy the house champagne from any family. And I was like, okay, can you tell me more? And he's like, if they can't make a good house champagne, I don't trust them to make something expensive or fancy. And that, like, I feel that way about measurement too. Like, if you can't get the basics right, why would you turn straight to the advanced methods or the complicated methods that are not explainable to your stakeholders? Like I don't know. And I don't know if that's a fair
I like
analogy, but oh, good. I'm glad, because I was like, this could go totally off road. I just think that's a really good mental model to have of like, and if there's a simple way to answer a question, I would always default to that versus trying to do the sexy, complicated thing that might actually not be able to answer the question, but it is the sexy, complicated thing. So therefore, it's cool and people want to do it.
But I'll rip on the Johnny come lately data scientist people who say, I went to a boot camp. I learned Python and SQL, and oh, look, AutoML, look, all I have to do, and there are plenty of companies that have been spawned on that front too. And it's kind of like you're conflating complexity with better, whereas there's value in going slowly. If you're a brand new product in a brand new market, you might not need much data at all. You're like, this is kind of a
spot on.
What am I mean, I'm a brand new company in a, I guess a brand new market by definition, brand new company. Like it's not, there's no amount of like AI and machine learning is going to take an upstart consultancy and somehow just magically, explode it. And I think that, or, blow it up to where it takes off. Like there is a human nature, and you sort of said it earlier, this is a slightly different angle on it, that the human brain has to simplify things. Like we're conditioned over evolution to say we have to take shortcuts, and that's where all of the wheel of biases come from. It's the brain trying to take shortcuts so that it can wrap its head around it. And I feel like we need to constantly be pushing against that. Or I see a mixed model, there's a coefficient, and by golly, I'm going to run with that, even if everything says that there's no validity here whatsoever. But yeah, the model with noise is going to it'll generate a model. It may say this model has no validity whatsoever, but boy, if somebody sees that on a chart, they just ignore this is of no or next to no value, and they're going to run with it because they're like, it's a model and it's got all that data, and also because that model had 10 million rows of data went into it. And so again, we're like, well, that must be zero data is bad. 10 rows is way better than zero. A million must be that much better. And then you go down that path, and now you also are able to churn out a bunch of stuff. Look at all the charts, look at all the stuff that we have, look at all the work that I've been doing. And all of that feels really, really tangible. And it can be tough to say, but why am I doing this? What am I really trying to solve? Am I really clear on what I'm trying to do?
Yeah. And Tim, I think you hit it with the why. Like my thoughts are, how humans are in the loop for AI. The more human in the loop, the more human the results may be. I think of it as asking why every step of the way, right? You have a big box and you say, this is my total outcome, my whatever you're measuring. You open up smaller boxes and you're constantly asking why. And if you automate out of that, the data tells you why, but that might not be the actual why. And one of the things that I have a false dichotomy in my head. I have analytics versus marketing science. And I think of analytics as like a passive accounting, here's what's going on, a nowcasting. And I think that's great for AI. But for marketing science, I think of it like boxing with your customers. You are putting something out there, they respond to it, you come back, and you're constantly having this to generate more information. And I think that differentiation between analytics and marketing science is why I'm very bullish on analytics for AI and very bearish on AI for marketing science. And just as a quick comment,
I need to roll this around in my head. I'm not sure where I sit on this or if I agree, but that's maybe part two.
Well, it's a false dichotomy. I have it in my head as a framework to simplify things myself so I could remember. But I had one other note, Tim, when you were talking about, either being a technologist or not. When I was doing search for Dell computers in 2010, anyone who typed in Google search, www.dell.com, we just dropped to the cheapest desktop computer because we're like, they are not technologists, they are anti-technologists. And that had way better conversion rates than all our other campaigns because they're like, I think I need a computer.
But I mean, Dell's a good example of where, I mean, there's just a natural sort of, I mean, Canva's probably the same way. Like on when you have less stuff and you have simpler stuff and you're a little more or a little more blunt in your understanding of who your customers are. I think we try to jump beyond that too quickly. Like let's run with that until we really have figured out that we have pushed this to its limits. Like we have it where it's running and it's automatic, and now we actually need to add something, add deeper questions, add additional data, or maybe there is a new technique because despite having complete understanding of the way that we're operating right now, we still have never really understood, why. I had a pharma client that they had one of their business units was vaccines, and it was comical how it would come up where we'd be doing all sorts of little things. We were sort of tweaking and tuning with the marketing and the digital experience. And then it would come up every couple of months. They'd be like, yeah, we just don't know why there are some doctors just will not recommend this vaccine, which is like absolutely everybody who hits this should, and we just don't understand why. So what are we going to change on the, homepage, banner? I'm like, that seems like a really gnarly question. And it's not like there's a simple answer, but could we please go and ask them? They're like, nah, we did a focus group 6 years ago, and focus groups are terrible. I'm like, are you kidding me? But it keeps coming up as being like, this is a big boulder, but you want to go
like the one question we need to solve. Yeah.
Yeah. This was actually yesterday, John brought up the street lamp, different versions of the story, but that was a classic case of where like the real problem was for them, a significant channel had something they did not understand, but they instead went and looked under the street light because that's where the light was. That they had the Adobe Analytics data, and they had some these are the data sets we have, and I'm like, you're so frustrating.
They had one really good teacher when I was at Google that was in charge of a large part of the machine learning practice, and they were teaching the other business organization about it. And he was a theater major before getting into AI, and this is in 2013, 2014. And I was thinking about that a lot, of like the path to get there. And if you're trying to capture human emotion, trying to understand motivations and reasons why, if you don't have the data, it doesn't matter what model you throw at it. It's just still going to be bad. And I think that's the same thing with the complexity that you mentioned earlier. It's like you try to cover up what you don't have by making other assumptions and inserting a little hocus pocus into your model to make it say what you want it to say. And then it just becomes opinion-based, inform-based, which is fine. I think there's nothing wrong with that, especially Mo in the smaller markets where you might not have that fidelity, right? Is you need to make those assumptions, and that's why we all currently have jobs. But that's definitely something that, the over reliance on the data that's there is always a challenge to kind of walk away from. They either walk completely into it, or they walk very much away from it, or into it or away from it with the stakeholders that you have to manage. They're either 100% data driven. And I think, Mo, you mentioned something about this on one of your earlier podcasts about like it being a crutch for decision making. In terms of if you don't have it, you don't make decisions. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? That was on the other one you recommended I check out before the show.
You might have to jog my memory a little bit more, because that sounds like something I was like on a soapbox, and now I can't recall it.
Well, you have a lot more episodes. This is 5 for me, so eventually. I know, Tim, you said it was like one blur where you're like, was I in that episode?
Well, it is. I mean, this is not quite where that was, but as you're talking about Google, and I go to, one of our favorite episodes, even though boy did she abuse the crap out of me, but I deserved it, was Cassie Kozyrkov.
Oh, Cassie, yeah,
she was
that was
the
a
chief
great
decision
time.
scientist at Google at the time. But it's interesting is you were talking about the analyst versus the marketing science, and she makes the decision or the distinction, a lot of her writing between the analyst and the data scientist, and the analyst being very, very much more the kind of, loosey-goosey, rapid kind of exploration, come up with ideas, and the data scientist saying, does this really hold water? But I cannot recommend strongly enough her making friends with machine learning and AI. It's like a 3 hour, but she's got it in little bits and pieces, because this was somebody who absolutely intellectually and skills wise can do all of the fancy stuff. And she spends 3 hours talking about not to get hung up on that, to actually think about decisions. And now as she's left Google and she's on this is all about making decisions. And that's where she's like, I am not going to be the chief data scientist. I am a decision scientist. I am in this business to help people make better decisions, to the point that, and that's what she kind of was on our episode a couple of years ago. And now that's what she's kind of put her stake in the ground and said, that's what I'm here to do, is help people make better decisions, and not, I'm going to help people, spin up the fanciest models, which is a skill she absolutely has. But she's like, that's not where value comes from.
I think that's one of the tensions, though, with the data scientists that are working kind of on the ground, is that, I guess from my perspective, I very much see our role as helping the business make better decisions. And I think sometimes there is this desire by our data scientists to have the most right answer, and that we can't make a decision until we have the most right answer. Mm-hmm. And I feel like sometimes I'm almost trying to like walk them back and be like, okay, but we have enough information here to make a decision. And would we make a different decision if we had this extra data, or I don't know, it was, you had more confidence in it, or whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. And I actually feel like it's a real tension that we have to walk, of like almost trying to work with our data science to be comfortable with less. And I don't know, maybe that's just the organization that I'm in. There could be other organizations where they feel like it's the opposite, and the data scientists are like, we should go do this, with not a lot. But that's not the experience of the team that I work with. But it definitely is a tension that we have to work within.
Yeah, I like when I hear like a 95% confidence, or when I hear the utilization of statistical significance, used throughout the org. It's or through organizations in general. I feel it's like a way of saying I am this right or this not right, and it's really just a measure of how confident am I with this information, and would they be better off receiving this information, or could it just be random noise that doesn't help them at all and steer them in the wrong direction? And that was a challenge that I think businesses face, right? If we have like the spectrum, now we're adding more. We have your analyst, your business intelligence, you have your marketing science, you have your data science, and maybe decision sciences somewhere over there. And it's like on this end you have the business realities that people are facing, and then on this side you have academia. And when I was in tech, or I still am in tech, in big tech, I guess, you had the business side that would sell the products. You had the engineering that would make the products to be sold. And then you had academia somewhere awkwardly in the middle. And if you're not building it and you're not selling it, and you're only saying, don't tell them this, don't tell them that, because it doesn't have that rigor, and it's not helping the business and it's not helping the product, you could be in a little bit of a trouble organizationally. And this is something that I like when, I sit across a whole bunch of clients, is where does their analytics organization sit relative to their decision makers, relative to their other teams? Because that's a really indicative of how important they value it and what they align it with in terms of the decisions that they're trying to make with this information.
Oh, I've never thought about that, but I love that. I feel like, I'm not looking for a job, but the next time I'm like, I feel like that would be a good way also to tell you the value they place on their data organization.
But not to, I'll slag on the analytics world, because I come from the analytics world as well. I think there are, a lot of what we're talking about is like, well, the business needs to understand that it's uncertainty and they're trying to make decisions. We need to work with them. There are plenty of analysts, and I will say entire analytics teams, that put themselves up on a pedestal that, the Deming quote, and I saw somebody with this as her background on like LinkedIn, the "In God we trust, all others bring" data. And I'm like, get out. Like Deming, brilliant, brought a lot of stuff, but he's a process guy. Like he baked in uncertainty and variance. Like he was all about that, but it's made this shorthand there, I think, and I think it's getting better because I think there are more blending of professions coming into it. But I feel like there was on the marketing side, there was a good 10 or 15 years where there was this unfortunate feedback loop where the analysts were like, we have the data, we have the truth, we have the answer, and whether that's multi-touch attribution or digital analytics or whatever, and their business counterparts were saying, yes, you have the data, you have the answer, and it just kind of spiraled in this cycle where even the analysts weren't realizing that they didn't have the answer, and they would kind of, denigrate people who, they're just going off of their 35 years of experience and their deep knowledge of the industry, but they didn't look at any data. I'm like, well, if they were data successful, maybe it's worth listening to what they're saying. So
yeah. Our grandparents are big data, right? They've seen more relationships in families than anyone else. So when grandma has advice, you want to listen because they have a lot of observations. It's just a matter of if it's formal or informal, right? I think that was Seth from Everybody Lies. We got coming up on time here before the Q&A section. Again, audience, if you want to ask some questions, we'll work them in. But I want to ask two things. One is the spicy soapbox section, where we can talk about our soapbox moments, things that are hot takes. But then before that, this is something we discussed right before this call, would be, what do you feel are the gaps in the market that, aside from the amount of work and the challenges of startups and all those pieces, what would be a technology or company that you think is so sorely needed that you wanted to start your own company? And I'll start with Tim, because 2 months ago you started your own company.
So yeah, I sort of took the Facts and Feelings as a consultancy that in many, many ways is a kind of a reaction or a pushback, a very hard pushback to all of the pressures of, if you just gather more data and get enough fancy technology on it, then at some point you'll get to the answer. Like I've worked with so many large organizations over the years that it's always moving from Google to Microsoft, or moving from Tableau to Power BI or Adobe Analytics to Google Analytics. It's always the next thing is going to give the answer, or the next thing, privacy things. Now we need to invest as much money as we invested last year, so we backslide at a slower rate because, oh my God, cookies, and so to me, it is about, I think that's because we're getting into the data too quickly, and that a lot of organizations, their best point of leverage is to kind of we say less and better. We say the elegantly simple but brutally hard work of translating people with data and technology to, I just botched it, so hopefully none of my coworkers are listening to this. But I think we need to put more human thought in it, because that's hard, but it actually pays huge dividends that we don't spiral down into super complex analytical or marketing science problems and data sets. They may still exist, but you're going after them with much, much more focus. So I think it's on the people on the business side and helping them focus a bit more.
How about you, Mo? What are we building hypothetically in our minds?
Well, first, I don't want to ever have a startup. I like working for the woman. I've worked that out about myself. But to be honest, I don't even think there is a gap in the market. I think it's probably the area that I'm most passionate about. And Jennifer has asked a really good question in the chat, which will help answer a little bit of this as well, is I actually would do something more in experimentation, of marketing experimentation, because I know for us, moving from attribution, it wasn't like we're going from attribution to an MMM. And actually we have another company coming over soon to do like a lunch and learn session with our team on this. It was experimentation that got the buy-in. So we ran a series of smaller experiments. We did different types. We do both what's like a geo or a blackout holdout, whatever, I don't know, whatever terminology people use, wherever they are. But we also did what's called like a pulse experiment. So basically we turn money on, off, on, off, on, off over different periods of time. And the results from that really is what got our business buy-in to evolve our measurement, because we were able to answer some questions, really long running questions the business had through those experiments. And so there are lots of vendors that work in this space. But I think for me, if it was an area that I had to go in to do with marketing measurement, that would probably be the one that I think would be the most interesting to me. And also from like the complexity and those, like Tim said, so much thought you can put into how to do experiment design and do it well. That I just feel like there'd be a lot of value and it would be a really enjoyable company. So, selfishly.
Can I, like, to me, and I was not really in the experimentation world. Then I was just in A/B testing and thought I had to track every user. Then I started to understand how the testing could be, but the little light bulb went on. Like, literally, an experiment is 100% data. You design the experiment and then you collect the data. And it's actually weird because there are people saying, but I've got reams and reams, lakes and lakes and warehouses of data. Can I just run stuff on that? It's like you can, but that's this secondhand data. If you have a really good question, if you're running an experiment, it kind of forces you to say, I can't answer super detailed. I can answer, it's going to force me to focus on what's a really important question that has a high level of uncertainty. And I have zero data about it. I mean, I have whatever, maybe I've done some exploratory stuff, but I'm going to answer that question by collecting new data in a disciplined, designed way. So
Katie Milkman, though, does have a very good episode on the Choiceology podcast about natural experiments and using the data you've already got to answer questions, which is also a very good listen.
And Malcolm Gladwell talks about experiments and butchers what natural experiments are. So +1 for Choiceology.
So, that would be my spicy section there. We won't get into that.
The milkman delivers. So,
but there is something that our CEO John Wallace says is, if you don't have the data, create better data, and that's exactly what experiments do, right? If that correlative information is low signal, flat spend, you're not really getting anything to see what it does to your bottom line. So test it and create it, because no PhD is going to suddenly turn a bad signal good. It's just they insert their opinions with experience, and then it looks more true. That doesn't mean the data is saying it's more true. So I think with that, we should probably do a little bit on the spicy takes. What is something, maybe your soapbox, things in the industry that you wish you could change, if you could wave a wand, if you could tell people to stop talking about things this way, what would be something that you would kind of put out there? Maybe something that doesn't even fit the analytics power hour because it's a different format. So go rogue. Like, this is a chance.
I would make all data opt-in or double opt-in, just regardless of, and just say you're never going to have this complete data set. And I mean, I would like to spin back 20 years and make that kind of the way that things operated. But if we could get people say you're never going to have complete, you're always going to be working with some sort of sample. And so stop fetishizing this user level detail, and so many things go away. Because you're like, you're not touching the privacy goes so far that you're compliant with everything. People have to send you a prick of blood through the mail before you can track them. I would love to do that, because I think it would force asking bigger questions, and then probably using more experimentation, valuing human judgment, even if it's a longitudinal experimentation. So there's mine. I don't think I had that teed up. Something you just got.
No, I like the off the cuff, and at first I was shocked, but I came around to it. I think you explained it well, so I've lightened my shock. That was a great answer. Thank you.
Mine are just not that exciting, but I've just got to say, I don't feel like I've been in the industry that long, but I am just so sick of talking about attribution, and everybody has to do personalization. Everybody expects a personalized experience. Those are the two topics that I just start to get PTSD, and I just, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be no one talks about those things ever again. And the funny thing is, I now do think attribution has some place or places in your measurement journey. And I think it is not totally useless, with caveats, but I'm just sick of having the conversation about, I'm just, fatigued.
Well, that's the pendulum swung, the one-to-one marketing craze. And then it's somebody needed to do the math to actually be like, I remember sitting down doing that with somebody trying to lay out this detailed nurturing program. I'm like, okay, let's just mathematically figure out how much content you're going to need to make this spaghetti. Like you're telling a story to yourself that is a fiction, and it's probably not where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck.
And I also think that like a brand stands for something. And if you're personalizing for everyone, you're standing for nothing. If you have like if T-Mobile decided whatever color is your favorite color is our brand, you'll never see the magenta and white and assume it's a T-Mobile ad out of the corner of your eye with a display. You know, it's like, how do you get creative wear-in? How do you get brand identity when you're personalizing everything? So I'm with you on that whole personalization at scale piece. And I'll also give the dichotomy of even brand versus performance, or upper and lower funnel. It's like all brand is performance and all performance is brand. And that, like, yes, one is better than the other in terms of the way we do it. But I think talking about it that way almost cheapens what both of them do for your business. So that would probably be my soapbox, just piggybacking off of Moe's. We do have a couple questions in the chat all around AI. There's one from Angelo asking about the AI generated search results, how that might change the business and change the quality of the traffic, as well as Rama asking about investing more money in the Gen AI space. So the personalization piece maybe hits on that a little bit. So is there anything you want to reflect, either quality of traffic of targeting with AI, or the replacing standard measurement, or generating the ads themselves that maybe you'd want to hit on? I'm kind of lumping two questions together awkwardly because of time constraints. So sorry.
And you have 60 seconds. Yeah, Mo, why don't you take this one?
Here's an amalgamation.
You're our in-house technologist.
I still think, I mean, on the whole Google with the search results, there's part of me that wants to say, if you say something unique, or you have something unique and thoughtful to offer, like and maybe this is me being sort of Pollyanna, like, what is it you do great and do that? I think there are the copyright and, grabbing stuff, but the fact that we've had this kind of skeevy system of SEO and SEM battling this game off in the margins and trying to generate content that's optimized, like, good on you. You know what? That blew up. That's kind of gotten to be a pretty crappy game anyway, where people were just trying to generate content to drive clicks, to drive conversions. And instead of saying, I don't know, what makes us unique and differentiated and valuable, which maybe me being not a marketer and Pollyanna dodges the question.
I think the takeaway from this is marketers just need to slow down, understand their customer, and understand their brand. And AI is not going to solve those epiphanies that you have by actually doing that work. Is that a fair summary there?
Yeah. Talk to customers. You know what? AI's, yeah. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. Having AI actually do customer interviews would be kind of a fascinating thing to
Would
try.
That be a nice experience for the customer, though?
I mean, if it's smooth enough,
possibly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Pass the Turing test.
That's the product. New company.
There we go. We just created a company, guys. Sweet. Do you guys want to plug the Analytics Power Hour? Give a little background of what that is for our audience to check out your next episode, and then we can close.
Sure. You want me to do that?
Sure.
So, Analytics Power Hour. This is our 10th year of doing it bi-weekly. The vibe, it's kind of similar to this. It's kind of what were the conversations that we would have at conferences in the bars after hours, and get debates and find hot takes that we didn't realize we had. So analyticshour.io, and we've got, there are episodes out there. We've got a nice little search function that you can.
I was going to say, like it scans from like career stuff to, I don't know, industry trends. We've also had John Wallace from LiftLab on talking about MMMs and measurements. So there's a really wide range of topics. So you can have a search around. Like Tim said, there is a very good search functionality now. Get an idea of the kind of topics you want to have a listen to.
There's actually a generative AI chat function on it. So if you go to it, you can just click in the bottom right corner and ask it a question. And it's the training data is all of our past episodes, which is kind of wild and just there for fun. But
that's awesome. Is it like a rag to say this is the episode you should listen to, or is it more of a response, kind of like the
It's a response. It then recommends sort of episodes. And there were some kind of quirky things when it first started, but it's kind of interesting. We've got 245 episodes, so there's a lot of content. They pointed out to us that that's actually a decent amount of content. So if you ask it analytics questions, it can come up with some decent answers.
Sweet. I want to geek out with you, but for the sake of our audience, speaking of conferences, I hope to see you guys at Commerce Next Growth in NYC in the next 3 weeks. Come by our booth. And if you want to mention your favorite Indiana Jones movie, you'll get a surprise, I guess. And of course, the next CYE is June 25th at 11 a.m. Pacific with Philip, the co-founder and CEO of Tatari. Thanks again to the audience, Mo and Tim. This was a pleasure, both in the pre-calls and the interview itself. I like geeking out with you guys, and hopefully we can have some even nerdier conversations, not in front of people that might be bored from our super nuanced questions that we ask each other. But thank you again, audience, questions, participation, Mo and Tim. Thanks for a great episode. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It was fun.